room went quiet before I even reached my seat. Not the kind of quiet that happens when someone drops a glass or says something awkward. This was different. It moved through the banquet hall like a wave, starting near the entrance, spreading table by table until I could feel it press against my chest. I was wearing my dress uniform, and my brother's new in-laws were staring at me like I had walked into the wrong building. I should back up. My name is Leah. I'm 32 years old. I grew up in Guelph, Ontario, the younger of 2 kids in a family where my brother Brendan was always the obvious one, the one teachers remembered, the one neighbors asked about, the one my parents drove 4 hours to watch play rep hockey on weekends, while I stayed home with my aunt and read books about the Second World War. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. It's just the shape of how things were. Brendan is charming in a way that fills a room without trying. He has this laugh that makes strangers feel like they've known him for years. He went to Western, got a business degree, started working for a commercial real estate firm in Toronto, and by 28 had his name on a lease for a condo on King Street West. Our parents tell that story at dinner parties. They've been telling it for 4 years. I joined the Canadian Armed Forces at 19. I did my basic training at Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. I applied for the infantry officer training program and got in. I did tours. I came home. I went back. I came home again. I worked my way up through the ranks slowly, the way most people do when they're not in the movie. Through years of cold mornings and paperwork and making decisions nobody thanks you for until much later, if ever. By 30, I was a captain. By 32, I'd been awarded the Meritorious Service Medal for operations work in a region I'm not going to name here, because that's not the point of this story. The point of this story is a Saturday in September, at a golf and country club 40 minutes outside of Ottawa, where my brother was marrying a woman named Courtney, and where I learned something about my family I should have understood a long time ago. Courtney is fine. I want to say that clearly, because she's not the villain here, and I don't want anyone to think she is. She's a marketing director. She's organized and confident, and she has an eye for color that showed up in every detail of that wedding. The sage green napkins, the dried flower arrangements, the little craft paper escort cards with everyone's names in calligraphy. It was beautiful. Genuinely. Her family is from Oakville. Her father runs a wealth management firm. Her mother sits on 2 charitable boards. They are the kind of people who say cottage the way other people say second home, and they mean it differently. I'd met them twice before the wedding, both times at dinners where I arrived in civilian clothes and nobody asked much about what I did, and when I answered anyway, because someone always asks, there was a polite pause, a smile, and then the conversation moved on to property values in Muskoka. I didn't take it personally. I've been in rooms my whole life where what I do makes people uncomfortable in a way they can't name. It's not hostility, it's more like they don't have the vocabulary, so they change the subject. What I didn't expect was my own mother calling me 3 days before the wedding. Leah. She said my name the way she does when she's about to say something she's rehearsed. I want to talk to you about Saturday. Okay. Courtney's family, they're quite formal. It's going to be a very elegant event. The venue is really lovely, and I think everyone is going to look just. Mom, you do. I just think it might be nice if you wore a dress. I sat with that for a second. I was planning to wear my dress uniform. Silence. Mom, you do. It's just, Leah, you know how much we love what you do. We're so proud of you. But a military uniform at a wedding might feel a little out of place. Courtney's parents have a certain idea of what the day should look like, and I don't want anything I just don't want there to be any awkwardness. I've worn my dress uniform to weddings before, I said. It's formal attire. It's actually more formal than most of what people are going to be wearing. I know, but this is Brendan's day. That one landed differently. Not because it was cruel. My mother isn't a cruel person, but there was something in how she said it. This is Brendan's day, as if my existence in my own uniform was somehow a threat to it, as if me being fully myself, wearing what I had earned the right to wear, might take something away from him. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't call her back. The drive to the venue took me through the kind of Ontario countryside that looks like it belongs on a calendar. Rolling fields, old fence lines, maples just starting to turn orange at the edges. I had the windows down. The September air smelled like cut grass and something faintly like smoke from somewhere far off. I thought about what my mother had said. I thought about all the times I made myself smaller in that family, sat quietly at Christmas while Brendan's promotions were toasted, nodded politely when relatives said things like, "But don't you worry about, danger?" As if the question itself was the end of a conversation rather than the beginning of one. I thought about the time Brendan called me from a parking garage at 2 in the morning because he'd maxed out 2 credit cards and needed someone to wire him $800 before a check cleared. I sent it within the hour. He paid me back 4 months later in cash without mentioning it again. I thought about my deployment, about the night I don't talk about publicly, the one that led to the commendation, the one that cost something I haven't fully calculated yet, about coming home to a family that said, "Welcome back," and then asked me if I'd seen any good movies lately. I pulled into the venue parking lot, checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, straightened my cap, and got out of the car. I was wearing my dress uniform. The ceremony itself was lovely. Courtney cried when she saw Brendan at the altar. He cried too, which surprised me. My brother has always kept his emotions at a careful distance, and I found myself genuinely moved by it. Whatever else I can say about that day, I believe they love each other. That part was real. I sat at a table near the back during the cocktail hour, next to a retired school teacher from Courtney's mother's side named, well, I'll just call her the teacher, who spent 40 minutes telling me about her garden and her daughter's divorce, and didn't once ask me what the medals on my chest meant. I didn't mind. She was kind. But I noticed the looks. I've been noticing them since I walked in. Not from everyone. Most people glanced and moved on, the way you do when something registers as unusual but not threatening. Some people smiled, genuinely, the kind that started in their eyes. A few people, mostly older men, gave me the slight nod that veterans give each other, the one that means I see you and nothing more needs to be said. But Courtney's father, I'll call him my brother's new father-in-law, looked at me twice from across the room. And then looked away deliberately, the second time, in a way that was its own kind of statement. My mother found me during the cocktail hour. She touched my arm and leaned in. "Leah." Just my name, the rehearsed voice again. "I'm here, Mom. I came. I'm at my brother's wedding." She looked at my uniform, then at me, then she pressed her lips together and went back to the table where she and my father were sitting with Courtney's parents. I watched her go. I drank my sparkling water. I thought about leaving. I didn't leave. The reception was held in a long, high-ceilinged room with windows along one side that looked out onto a manicured green. Round tables, white linens, tea lights, and glass holders. A band set up in the corner, proper musicians, a 5-piece group that played soft jazz during dinner and would, I assumed, switch to something danceable later. I found my table. I was seated with people I mostly didn't know. A cousin of Courtney's, a colleague of Brendan's from his firm, the colleague's wife, and 2 people whose connection I never quite figured out. Nice people. Polite conversation. Dinner came. The speeches were given. Brendan's best friend made everyone laugh with a story about a golf trip to Kelowna. Courtney's maid of honor made everyone cry with something about the years they'd been friends. My parents weren't asked to speak, which I noticed, though they didn't seem to. Or if they did, they didn't show it. I wasn't asked to speak either. I was the groom's sister. I was there. The band was starting their second set when it happened. I'd stepped away from my table to get a glass of water from the bar near the back of the room. The band was playing something low and melodic. The dance floor had a few couples on it, Brendan and Courtney in the middle, moving slowly, his hand on the small of her back. I was standing at the bar when a man about my father's age sat down on the stool beside me. He was wearing a dark suit with a Legion pin on the lapel, the kind of pin that means something specific, the Royal Canadian Legion, the one that veterans wear when they want to be seen without having to say anything. He looked at me. He looked at the medals on my chest. He looked back at my face. "Meritorious Service Medal," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." He held out his hand. "Korea, 72. I'm too old to be here, but my granddaughter made me promise." I shook his hand. "Leah, you're with the groom's side?" His sister. He looked out at the dance floor, at Brendan, back at me. Something moved across his face, a kind of quiet understanding that I've only ever seen in people who've been somewhere difficult and come back from it. "They ask you to hide it?" he said. I looked at him. "They always ask," he said, not unkindly, just as a fact. Before I could answer, someone else appeared on my other side. A woman in her 60s with close-cropped gray hair and the posture of someone who'd spent decades being the most competent person in any room she walked into. She looked at my uniform with the focused attention of someone who knew exactly what she was looking at. "Princess Patricia's?" she said, reading the insignia. "PPCLI, yes." My daughter-in-law was PPCLI. She paused. "She's over there." She nodded across the room toward a table near the windows. A woman in a navy dress looked up, caught my eye, and gave me that nod, the one that means "I see you." I nodded back. What happened next is something I've tried to describe to a few people since, and I've never quite gotten it right. I don't think I'll get it right here either, but I'll try. The band finished a song. There was the usual moment of applause, the shuffle of people returning to tables, someone laughing too loudly near the far wall. And in that moment of relative quiet, the man with the Legion pin stood up from his stool. He turned to face the room. He lifted his chin, and in a voice that was older but still carried, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, there is a Meritorious Service Medal recipient in this room." The room did not go immediately quiet. It happened in stages. Heads turned, conversations trailed off. The last few notes from the band faded as the musicians looked up. The woman with the close-cropped hair stood, then her daughter-in-law crossed the room, then 3 men at a table near the door. 2 of them in suits, one still wearing his poppy pin from the previous November, pinned carefully to his lapel because he always wore it until it fell apart. Then a couple near the windows, then another man alone at a table at the back who I later learned had served 2 tours in Afghanistan and never talked about it. 8 people, then 10. Then, by the time the room had fully realized what was happening, 12 people on their feet. My throat closed. I don't cry easily. That's not a brag. It's something I've had to work at, and there are costs to it I'm still paying. But standing there at that bar with a glass of water in my hand and 12 veterans on their feet in a room where 3 days ago my own mother had asked me to wear a dress, I came very close. Brendan was watching from the dance floor. I saw his face change. He knew what the medals meant. He'd seen them before at home in the box on my dresser. But I don't think he'd ever seen what they meant to other people. I don't think he'd ever had to. Courtney was watching too. She wasn't looking at me the way her father had earlier. She was looking at me the way people look when they're recalibrating something they thought they understood. My mother was at her table. Her hands were in her lap. Her face was very still. I'm not going to tell you that everything changed that night. That would be a tidier story than the one I actually lived. What I can tell you is what happened after dinner, when the band took their break and people moved to the patio for air. My brother found me by the railing that overlooked the course, the grass blue-gray in the dark, the sky that particular shade of deep September black you only get in eastern Ontario when the humidity has finally broken. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He stood beside me for a moment. He had his jacket off, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled. He looked happy in the way people look happy at their own weddings, a little dazed, a little overwhelmed, a little like they can't fully believe the day is real. "I didn't know," he said finally. "About what?" "About what, all of that. What it means, the standing up." I looked out at the course. They do it for the medal, not for me specifically. "They did it for you." He said it quietly, firmly, the way Brendan says things when he's decided he's going to mean them. "You were the one standing there." I didn't say anything. "Mom shouldn't have called you," he said. "I didn't know she was going to do that. I didn't ask her to." I turned to look at him. "I wouldn't have asked you to take it off," he said. "I wouldn't have, Leah. I know things have been." He stopped, started again. "I see you, okay? I know that maybe I haven't always acted like it, but I see you." My brother is not a man who says things like that. He's not wired for it. The fact that he was saying it now, on his wedding night, in the dark on a patio in front of a golf course, I felt something in me unclench that I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Courtney wants to know if you'll come for Thanksgiving," he said. "She asked me to ask you, specifically you. She wants to understand what you do." I almost laughed. That's a long conversation. "She knows." He paused. "She's already apologized for her dad, by the way. She told him off in the parking lot." I don't think he fully understood what happened in there, and she explained it. I looked at him. She did? Courtney is better than me, he said, simply, without any embarrassment. I'm working on catching up. My mother came to find me before I left. The party was winding down, the band playing quieter now, a few couples still dancing, the older guests saying their goodbyes. I was getting my coat from the cloakroom when I heard her heels on the hardwood. Leah. I turned. She looked smaller than she had at dinner. Not physically, my mother is not a small person, but something in her posture had shifted. She looked like a woman who has realized she was wrong and hasn't yet figured out how to carry that realization. I didn't understand, she said, what it meant when those people stood up. It's okay, Mom. It's not, though. She said it quietly. I asked you to hide it. I asked you to hide something you earned. I waited. I didn't realize I was doing that, she said. I thought I was just managing. I do that. I manage things. I try to make everything smooth, and sometimes I make it worse. Sometimes, I said. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. You've always been the harder one to know. Not because you're cold. I know people think that about you. But it's not true. It's because you do things I don't have a language for. I don't know how to talk about what you do. I don't know what questions to ask, and I think I covered that up by not asking anything. It was the most honest thing my mother had said to me in years, maybe ever. Then ask, I said. I'll answer. She reached out and touched the Meritorious Service Medal. Just briefly, just her fingertips on the edge of it, like she was making herself understand the weight of it. Will you tell me about it? She said. Someday, when you're ready. Someday, I said. Yes. I drove home alone, the highway mostly empty, the radio playing something I didn't register. The window was down and the air was cold now, properly cold, the way it gets in Ontario in September when the sun goes down and reminds you that winter is not far. I thought about the man with the Legion pin. I don't know his name. I never got it. But I thought about him choosing to stand in a room full of strangers at someone else's wedding because he saw a medal and understood what it cost. I thought about Brendan's face when the room went quiet, the recalibration in it, the beginning of something. I thought about my mother's fingertips on the medal. Here is the thing about service that took me a long time to understand. It doesn't need to be seen to be real. The work is the work regardless of who's watching, regardless of whether anyone in your family can find the words for it. I know that. I've always known that. But there is something, I don't have a perfect word for it. There is something that happens when the people who matter most to you finally look at what you've built and see it clearly, maybe for the first time. It doesn't change the past, but it changes what comes next. I got home just after midnight. I hung my uniform carefully, the way I always do, jacket on the hanger, medals facing out, cap on the shelf above. I stood in the dark for a moment and looked at it. Then I went to bed. I called my mother in the morning. We talked for an hour and a half. She asked 3 questions I didn't expect and listened to all 3 answers without once trying to change the subject. It was a beginning. That's what I'd call it, not a resolution, not a fixed thing. A beginning. And for now, that was exactly enough. I keep thinking about the man with the Legion pin. He didn't know me. He didn't owe me anything. He stood up in a room full of strangers at someone else's wedding because he saw what was on my chest and understood, without needing it explained, what it had cost. That's what integrity looks like when it has nothing to prove. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't calculate the room first. It just acts because it knows what's right, and that's enough reason. I spent years making myself easier to digest for the people who were supposed to know me best. I wore civilian clothes to family dinners. I changed the subject when relatives didn't know what to say. I told myself I was being considerate, and maybe I was, partly. But I was also quietly agreeing with the idea that what I'd done was something to manage rather than something to speak plainly about. That cost me something too. Not the service itself, which was always clear in my mind, but the habit of shrinking around the people I loved that had consequences I'm still untangling. When my mother called 3 days before the wedding, she wasn't being cruel. I want to be honest about that. She was doing what she's always done, smoothing edges, keeping peace, managing the surface of things so nothing uncomfortable breaks through. She's smart in a lot of ways, my mother. But that kind of intelligence, the kind that's always looking for the path of least friction, can miss things. It can miss the person standing right in front of it. What she didn't account for, what I think none of us fully accounted for, was that the truth has a way of surfacing anyway. You can ask someone to leave part of themselves at the door. You can make it seem reasonable, even kind. But the room will still go quiet when they walk in, because some things are real enough that people recognize them even when they've never seen them up close before. Brendan standing on that patio, his tie loose, his jacket off, saying, "I see you." I think that took something from him. Not courage exactly, but honesty. The kind that requires you to look at the gap between who you've been and who you could be and choose the second one out loud. That's not easy. I know it cost him something to say it because I know my brother and I know that directness is not his natural language. He chose it anyway. That matters. The choosing matters. I'm not the easiest person to be close to. I know that. I filled a lot of walls that made sense at the time and are now just habits I'm trying to examine. But I think the thing this whole day taught me, if I had to name it, is that showing up honestly, fully, without apologizing for what you've carried, is not selfishness. It's the only way the people who love you ever get the chance to actually know you. And the people who rise to meet that, the ones who stand up, literally or otherwise, those are the ones worth staying close to. My mother asked me to tell her about it someday. I'm going to. I think it'll be a long conversation, and I think parts of it will be uncomfortable for both of us, but I'm not going to make it easier than it needs to be. Not this time. She deserves the real version. So do I.